Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? It is cold outside right now. I'm in my shop. The lights are, I don't know, maybe they'll go out, who knows. But the cold snap has finally hit Oklahoma. It's about 50 degrees in here, so this one's not gonna be too long. I've talked a lot on my channel and on my podcasts and with my friends over the years about the writings of Gary Paulsen, the influence that he's had on me, the ways that I've been able to draw resilience from the lessons that he has shared through his writings, whether he's being autobiographical or he's writing his fiction about surviving in the wilderness. This right here is the 30th anniversary edition of HATCHET, the book that made his career. And this is for a guy who was writing and publishing for 25 years before this book came along. He had a rough childhood. He covered that in another book that ended up making my best of year list a while ago. I'm gonna do an entire video just on that one. But the reason why I'm sharing some HATCHET with you, some Paulsen with you, is I've got some friends that are going through a bit of a tough time. Actually, I know a lot of people who are going through tough times. It's just kind of the times that we live in right now. But two of them specifically sounded off last night on Twitter. And we're kind of all from the same religious community, and one of them just kind of threw it out there. She's like, there are times when it's hard to have faith, and some friends rallied around her, said, hey, what's up? Is everything okay? Which is kind of a dumb question. That's not exactly what we said, but just hey, unload. What's up? And she didn't get too specific. She was just down, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes there is a specific reason you don't want to share. It is what it is. But the reason I highlight specifically the resilience that I get from Paulsen and from other books, I guess, is that the things that you feed yourself when you're kind of in that space, they really matter. And if you can find something to draw on, I'm not saying that it can wipe all those down and low feelings away, but it can help you kind of find your way out of it. And I consumed these Brian Robinson books, the character in HATCHET that Gary Paulsen was writing about. I consumed them over and over again in high school, just going through the usual high school stuff that you go through. And none of them in the series had a bigger impact on me than this one, Brian's Winter. It is one of my all-time favorite books. It's an alternate ending to the original where Brian doesn't get rescued at the end of the summer, and he has to learn how to survive through the winter. He's got to change everything that he spent the last 3 months knowing ever since his plane went down. He's 13 years old, and all he's got for survival is the eponymous hatchet. And he has to kind of break the things that he thought he knew out of his head and instead, start learning through observing, learning things firsthand and not just relying on things that he'd been told by people who never had to go through what he went through. I think there's value to that. I found this one sitting on a shelf when I was 14 years old at home. It was just in a batch of books that my mom had ordered from the catalog for my siblings, and I grabbed it. I was like, oh, I remember HATCHET. And I read through this one and I devoured it, and I must have read it 5 or 6 more times over the next month. It happened to be Thanksgiving weekend that I found it, and even more appropriately, Brian kind of celebrates Thanksgiving in here. After getting attacked by bears and hit by tornadoes and sprayed by skunks and dealing with all of the things that you would realistically deal with if you were stranded in the northern woods, he suddenly has a realization in what he assumes is late November because he hasn't been keeping track of the calendar. He has a realization that it's probably close to Thanksgiving, and he immediately pushes that thought away. He gets kind of into an emotionally low down spot. He goes and throws that away. He goes, what do I have to be thankful for? I'm stuck out here. Everything sucks. Nobody even knows if I'm alive or dead. Nobody's found me. I don't know how to get out of here. And this thought comes to him. He says, it could have been worse. You could have been down with the pilot. He was in a little 2-seater plane. The pilot had a heart attack, and the pilot died. Brian crashed into a lake. He's been there ever since. It's not necessarily that the cure for what ails us is to think that it could be worse or that we could have it worse than somebody else. I would say that the cure then is what Brian proceeds to do. And I want to read it to you. I want to read it to you in Paulsen's own words. Then a small voice, almost a whisper, came into his mind after he asked himself, what do I have to be thankful for? He says, it could have been worse. You could have been down in the plane with the pilot. And he felt awful for his attitude. He turned away from the food and forced himself to be grateful for all the good luck he'd had and to not think about the bad at all. Just that, escaping from the plane alive, that was luck. And to be able to live and learn and know things, to be able to hunt, to be thankful for the animals' lives that had been spent to keep him fed, to be thankful for the deer and the moose, Lord, the moose, like getting a whole food store, and to be thankful for his shelter and knife and the hatchet, the key to it all. Nothing without the hatchet, just that would take all his thanks. And every stick, every twig of wood that burned to keep him warm in his sleeping bag, and Betty, it's a skunk, saving him from the bear and the chickadees that hung around the camp and the sun that brought each new day. And that, he thought, all that and more to be thankful for. And he ended the prayer, as it had seemed to become, with another thought about the pilot down in the lake, how he hoped that the pilot had had a good life and was where it was good for him now. I've got a lot of other thoughts that I'm going to share in the next video about Thanksgiving specifically, how we celebrate it in North America, how we celebrate it in the United States. Because, you know that I love to read about that subject, about the Mayflower, about the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims and all of their entanglements and the intricate history and the peace that they enjoyed for several decades before it all went to hell. And I just want to talk about that general sentiment of Thanksgiving, the idea of practicing gratitude, whether you've got a specific religion or not, just the practice of being thankful to whatever force provided you the good things that you have. I would urge you to practice that, to just think more positively about what's around you and what you can be grateful for, and see what that does for you. In our ridiculous postmodern culture, there's a phrase that gets bandied around a lot where we say, check your privilege, mark your privilege, acknowledge your privilege. I've always hated that notion. It kind of runs antithetical to the things that I personally value, but I think more to the point, it's a cheap counterfeit for the idea of counting your blessings. Being appreciative of what you do have and not just looking at what you need or what you're still trying to achieve or what you really want. And that can come from a whole bunch of different places. It can come from a place of genuine need. It can come from a place of the desire to consume and acquire more. It can be a good thing or a good reason or a bad reason for wanting more. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, when it all comes down to it, count your blessings, practice gratitude, whether it's being grateful to another person that you can name and that you can express that to directly, or like what Brian did. Not that Paulsen, really came off as religious in any of his writings, but he did reflect on these things, on the idea of gratitude and natural philosophy. I could easily get into the weeds on that subject, but it's cold in here and I can tell that I'm starting to ramble. I heartily endorse Gary Paulsen's books, especially the Brian Robison series. And to my friends, Riley, Elliot, everybody else who's just hitting those speed bumps, it happens. I don't want to sound like I'm belittling anything that you guys are going through. You're not alone, and I hope that anybody who's watching this feels the same way. And hey, there's a comment section below. If anybody wants to sound off, go right ahead. I'm gonna go back inside where it's warm and my wife is making dinner. Thank you guys. Drive safe. See you out there.